At Volkswagen Lease Summit, car buying's as easy as 1, 2, 3. All our new cars are priced to lease at $199, $299, or $399 a month. Plus, we have rates as low as 1.9% for 60 months and used cars for every budget. We make car buying easy. Get to VWLeaseSummit.com.
Well, all the attention now turns to this special session set to begin on Tuesday, June 18th in Topeka, where the Kansas legislature is not only going to talk about potentially getting tax cuts for Kansans done, but also now will actively and openly court the Kansas City Chiefs to potentially move across the state line. A letter was put out yesterday by the Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins, and our next guest, Senate President Ty Masterson, joining us on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Ty, good morning. We appreciate the time. And let's just start off with the enthusiasm. The reason behind trying to draw the Chiefs across the state line is what exactly?
Well, I think you nailed it, Pete. The enthusiasm is the enthusiasm, right? So I think one thing that needs to be made abundantly clear is our special session's number one objective is tax relief by far. Second is having it be done in one day, because her bringing us back for a special session just costs the taxpayer money, and she's repeatedly vetoed these things. So those are number two. So, but if we can happen to walk and chew gum at the same time, I'm not opposed to the conversation. So that's why we're in the conversation.
Okay, so the conversation, let's start with the star bonds. These things would be used to potentially attract the Chiefs. There's been a lot of chatter about them here this morning and in recent days and weeks. Do you view the star bonds as being a huge success, or do you think the jury is still out based on what some have claimed on this show this morning is a very low success rate of these things?
Yeah, so here's where I'm at on star bonds. And I'm not a huge fan of incentives in general, but if you're going to have an incentive, they're probably, because they're the most free market version of that, because the risk is all borne by the bondholder. So if you go look at the projects, right, I mean, you have the Kansas Speedway, big success there. You have the Prairie Fire thing that blew up in Kansas City. I think that actually proves that it's the bondholders on tap, because the Kansas taxpayers have not had to reach into that. We've had multiple attempts, including this year. So we reduced our food sales tax, which affected some of these bond districts. There was this big push for the taxpayers to backfill that, and we outright rejected all that. So we've kind of shown in history, if you're going to have any type of incentive, it's the most free market version of that, because all the risk is on the market and not on the taxpayer. And we're not going to do anything silly. The articles I've read here lately, they're all attached to the bill that was proposed at the end of our regular session, which we had no interest in. And it created all these massive expansions of things. And you saw what we did. We did nothing with it. And so to have a conversation, hence the letter, right? All I was getting was the same thing most of the general population was, a speculation and rumor. So we reached out to say, hey, is there a real conversation? And if there's something that doesn't risk our taxpayers that could potentially bring a win-win, hey, we're in for the conversation.
Have the Chiefs accepted your invitation?
Yeah, they're starting to have a conversation with us, because that's what's important, right? I don't want to spin our wheels. I don't want to waste any time if this is some type of game. So we've opened up a conversation to see if there's real potential there.
So these star bonds, I mean, I've heard so much and read so much reporting on this, as I'm sure you have, but you're telling me and the taxpayer that there is truly no risk to them in all this. I mean, who is then the bondholder if something does not work out, if the bonds are not being paid back by the increased revenue and sales taxes for this district?
So it's just like any other revenue bond that goes out. You see that a lot at the local government level, where it's right. You're betting on that. If I can take, blank farm ground to Jerry's world, you're, instead of having 100% of nothing, you're getting 50% of something, right? And so the risk is borne by the bond. Those that buy the bonds take the risk. Mm-hmm. So what you saw, I think the worst example of the star bonds, or the biggest failure, I guess, that Prairie Fire deal, what they had to do was renegotiate, their bonds, but there was no additional risk to the Kansas taxpayer.
How about the idea of the whole border war? I know this border war truce was agreed to by both governors who are still in office, Kelly and Parson, a few years ago. Do you see this as basically breaking that truce and really competing against the state of Missouri in a way that doesn't necessarily create more jobs or more economic benefit for the region at large?
Well, I mean, frankly, I wasn't part of any kind of truce, right? I'm a Kansas guy. I want Kansas to win at everything. I want us to do better. So I don't really care what any prior governor decided with that. Usually the guys that want the truth are the guys that are winning and you're losing. So I don't, as long as I can advance Kansas, and it's really not anything against Missouri or Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, right? I want to advance things in Kansas. And the truth is, I mean, even this subject matter is, it's exciting. It's exciting people, right? I mean, entertainment and sports transcends politics. That's why you have this be an interest subject for everybody. I walk out here and only the guys on the inside ask me about, well, what are you doing on taxes or school choice? But the low information voter, they're asking me, hey, what's going on with the Chiefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want a subject matter that excites my people to get out and vote. And if I can get Republicans to get out and vote, I get lower taxes and school choice and protect families. That's the thing for me. I want to see maximize our potential to win elections.
So you think this is a deal that also helps you in other ways, where this excites Republican primary voters to try to get the Chiefs over to Kansas, which can help you in other priorities?
Absolutely. It's more about that to me than anything else.
Interesting. Ty Masterson is the Kansas Senate president. He's on KCMO. What about this Scoop and Score Inc. That appears to have a lot of lobbyists attached to it who have advocated heavily for potentially trying to get the Chiefs across the state line? What is your relationship? What conversations have you had with this organization and the people involved with it?
I really have a relationship beyond been lobbied, right, about the conversation. They have they're being hired by a group. They have a fiduciary to their group. My fiduciary is to the Kansas taxpayers. So we run into that all the time, hordes of lobbyists that come in on any given subject. And so we have to make a decision that's actually the best for the Kansas taxpayer, and that's what we'll do. I mean, there's no reason we can't. If we can handle the subject and advance ourselves in the elections, I think it's worth having a conversation.
When you talk about conversations with the Chiefs in particular, are you anticipating them showing up to this special session and advocating, lobbying, conversing publicly with you? Or like how will that conversation with the team in particular go? And how will the taxpayer know where those conversations are at?
No, that's a good question, but the answer is no, right? I don't expect the Chiefs to show up and be publicly addressing the bill. I think what we want to know is, are there any tweaks or changes needed to our current star bond laws that would help facilitate the Chiefs coming over to Kansas that does not add any risk to my taxpayers? That's what I'm looking for. Are there minor tweaks that would help with that don't hurt us and could create a win-win situation? That's the conversation.
And what level or what number, when you look at bonds being issued, would you feel comfortable with? Because this would obviously, I imagine, I don't know what the Speedway was, but I got to imagine if this were to come to fruition, it would be by far the biggest star bond project in Kansas history, no?
No, I think it would, but that's not something we determine,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's going to be based on the estimated revenues of growth, right? And what that would be a fiduciary decision by those selling the bonds, right? To decide what is the size they think that can be handled by those growth revenues, and therefore what size the bonds could be. That's all a business decision.
But would it also be contingent on how you draw the star bond district for this specific project?
Sure, and I think that's probably one of the devils in the details.
Yeah.
What are they asking there? What does that look like? And there's been nothing. All I can guarantee you is the bill that everybody's been looking at from the end of session is not what we're talking about. So that's the conversation is what's a viable option for us.
Because you can, and I'm not saying you would do this, but like you could draw a district that says, these businesses 20 miles away from the stadium could inherently, theoretically benefit, and we're going to draw them into the district to then issue a larger number of bonds. Like you could do that just to kind of, throw it out there. That is possible, and that's where I think you're alluding to the devil is in the details, right?
You get it. I mean, absolutely, right? Yeah. For that matter, you could draw a district that was the entire state of Kansas.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
Right?
You could do that.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. All right. And that's where I think people need to be kind of paying attention to what's going on there. Well, we know we're in the early stages. Less than 2 weeks away from this special session. It starts on a Tuesday. And are you also willing to say that without anything on tax relief, this Chiefs conversation will not happen?
Yeah, it would be really hard. I mean, particularly I can only speak for my chamber, right, the Senate, and that is, yes, we would want to pass a big tax relief plan before we took on this conversation, because that is by far the priority. And we've done it over and over and over again. We're getting incredibly frustrated. I mean, we only had 20 no votes in the entire legislature on the last bipartisan tax plan she vetoed. So that is by far number one. So we will orchestrate things in a way that we take that up first.
We'll be watching, and we appreciate the time. Ty Masterson, Kansas Senate President on KCMO 95.7 FM. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Pete.
At Volkswagen Lease Summit, car buying's as easy as 1, 2, 3. All our new cars are priced to lease at $199, $299, or $399 a month. Plus, we have rates as low as 1.9% for 60 months and used cars for every budget. We make car buying easy. Get to VWLeaseSummit.com.